So I've been all over YouTube and I've looked and looked for a tutorial for this game going over all the comprehensive details and strategies and that sort of thing. And I've come up empty-handed. So I thought I might take it upon myself to go ahead and create a sort of mechanical and tactical tutorial on Injustice 2 to the best of my own ability. So that's exactly what you're going to see here. A no-nonsense guide and comprehensive tutorial of how to understand the finer details and apply strategies to your own gameplay in Injustice 2. This guide will cover topics, basic and advanced, and will serve as a broad overview for every mechanic this game has to offer. If I do miss anything at all, I do apologize and can create a separate video in the future. I have pages of notes on each topic I will discuss, and I know I can't even cover everything. So before we begin, I have a little introduction just explaining the purpose I hope this channel will serve, and a few shoutouts to inspiration I've gathered from several other YouTubers in the process of my research here. If you'd like to skip this introduction, I'll leave the timestamp in the description. I understand some of you are here for just the tutorial, and I can respect that. So before anyone here takes my word as law, I'd like to disclose to everybody that I'm only 16 years old at the time of recording this, and I am quite limited on technology capable of demonstrating the finest points of detail regarding each topic. You can probably tell that I'm quite limited on technology based upon the microphone I'm using right now. This is the built-in Mac microphone. Anyways, I plan to pull from several tournament matches and post commentary clips from my own Xbox. I'll be sure to reference you guys to any outside sources in case my explanation was not clear in any way, or you simply would like a little more of an explanation on that topic specifically. The goal of this video here is simply just to educate any newcomers to the technical aspects of the game, and maybe a few experienced people here will be able to better understand more advanced topics like frame data, for instance. I took inspiration for this video from the video I have linked on screen right here, the Comprehensive Guide to Mortal Kombat X. This is what really started me on the path into nitty-gritty details of NRS games, but I felt this video could have been more detailed than what 30 minutes could teach, so I decided to revise it and make it more extensive. I hope I can keep it interesting enough for people to sit all the way through. I also plan to give several shoutouts to YouTubers like Super, Shujinky Dink, Rio, Sajam, and various others for always trying to help the community by putting out tutorials or gameplay where they discuss the details of the game to help us all learn more about it. In the very near future, I plan to release analyses of each character in the game, discussing how to use them, their tools, their game plan, and their weaknesses. Very similar to the MKX character breakdowns done by Sajam, which I also felt could have been more detailed. Along with this, I plan to release tier lists and update them as each balance patch is applied, while also going over how the patch affects the general gameplay of specific characters. There is no knowledge that is not power. So without further ado, I present to you the tactical and mechanical tutorial for Injustice 2.
Now do you feel fear?
I have timestamps of each section laid out in the description, so for you more advanced viewers, you can skip the controls section. It would be an injustice for me not to cater to the possible newcomers. So with that being said, let's get into it. Injustice 2 is a 4-button fighter, meaning it has 4 face buttons used to attack, as opposed to something like Street Fighter with 6 buttons. The buttons are noted as integers, with X on Xbox, square on PlayStation being the light attack, Y or triangle being the medium attack, A or X being the heavy attack, and B or circle as your trait button. These buttons are 1, 2, 3, and 4, and are noted in combo notation as such. Attacks are done by pressing one of the face buttons with or without any directional input. Your right trigger, noted as R2, is responsible for meter burning, allowing certain moves to have special properties which will be discussed later. Your left trigger, noted as L2, is the flip stance button, which, if I'm being honest, is the most useless button in the game. There are only 2 uses in the game I can think of that require the flip stance button, and both of which are specific to 2 characters. Your right bumper, or R1, is your interactable button. Your left bumper, or L1, is your throw button. And the next few inputs are mobility inputs and require meter. Don't worry if you don't understand one of them, it will be covered later in the video. To move back and forth across the stage, I suggest you use whatever directional pad you have on your controller and not the joystick. To dash, press forward or backwards twice in quick succession. To do a meter burn dash or a meter burn roll, press forward twice in quick succession, followed by the meter burn button, causing you to roll and cover a lot of distance. To perform an air escape, press either up plus meter burn or back plus meter burn while airborne to escape any further hits that would continue a combo. To perform a clash, press forward plus meter burn while taking the hits from a combo. To perform a push block, press forward plus meter burn immediately after blocking a hit. Every character in the game shares a set of inputs known as universal inputs, and these inputs do the same on all characters. So for example, we have down 1, your universal crouching poke on all characters. We have down 2, your uppercut, down 3, the sweep, back 3, which is your wall bounce, and forward 3, which is your floor bounce. Again, every character shares these buttons and they all have the same effects on all characters with a few differences in frames and frame advantage and whatnot, which we'll go over later. On the more advanced side of things, we're going to go look into the settings here. If you're at all like me, you've probably scrolled through the settings once or twice to see what each one does. There are 4 settings at the bottom of the control presets screen I'd like to cover real quick. So the first listed here is release check, and I'm going to be very honest with you, this is arguably the most useless setting in the game. Have it off. Under no circumstance should release check be on. What it does is essentially allow the computer to read your button press as 2 separate inputs. Once when the button is pressed, and another when the button is released. This sort of feature came along in the early Street Fighter games, but seeing as how I've never really taken Street Fighter seriously, I wouldn't know its benefits. So always have it off. Alternate controls are listed next, and it seems this is a setting geared more towards if you have a fight stick, which the directional inputs are done on a joystick rather than a directional pad. Essentially what it does is require that special moves are done as a continuous flow on the joystick rather than the separate inputs that a D-pad would exhibit. For instance, a down back 3 requires 3 button presses, down, back, and 3 on the D-pad. But with alternate controls on, down back 3 requires a quarter circle motion backwards followed by the button 3. Next listed we have input shortcuts, which may sound like a helpful option to a beginner, but when you know the details behind it, it can somewhat hurt your gameplay. Let's say you're full screen with Atrocitus and you're currently crouching underneath projectiles from Deadshot. Since you're crouching, you are currently doing a down input. Say the Deadshot comes in on you, and you're still crouching, but you would like to start your offense with your forward 2. It's very likely that you'll result in up breath, down forward 2, instead of your forward 2, with input shortcuts on. This is because the crouching motion is read as the down input for the down forward 2, which is your up breath, and when you go for your forward 2, the down input is calculated before the forward 2, resulting in down forward 2. I'll post a link on the finer intricacies of the input shortcuts here. All in all though, I recommend you leave this setting off as well. Finally, we have button shortcuts. This essentially allows the throw button, L1, to be executed by pressing 1 and 3 simultaneously. This doesn't necessarily affect your gameplay, but is more a matter of preference. Some strings require the throw button as an input, and I find it much easier to press forward 1 2 throw on Black Adam than forward 1 2 1 plus 3. Either way, do what makes you feel more comfortable on this one. So that covers the basic controls in the game, and I'll be sure to go over the usage of all the meter burn moves I did previously at a later point in the video. Here we're going to transition into the fight itself.
Come on, strength pummels.
In any fighting game, the term neutral refers to the state both characters are in when they are neither defending nor attacking. Neither player has an advantage. When you and your opponent are both looking for the opportunity to strike, you're playing the neutral. One of the major criteria that measures a character's viability in the game is how he or she performs in the neutral. During this stage of the fight, tactics are being employed either by controlling space or by baiting the opponent into making mistakes. At some point, one character will proceed with his offense while the other character must defend. Here we'll discuss the states of offense and defense within Injustice 2.
The strong protect the weak.
Offense in Injustice 2 is executed by a series of normals, strings, and special moves. The main goal of the offender is to simply open up the defender's guard. To start, each character has their normals. A normal is simply a button press, either combined with a direction or not. Normals can serve multiple purposes, which is why each character is equipped with several. The first use of a normal is a poke. Pokes are faster normals that cover a short range and typically stun the opponent long enough to interrupt any offense they would have started. You'll typically see your down one as your most useful poking normal. Pokes in themselves are thrown out for a number of reasons. The primary reasons for poking your opponent is to either start your own offense, challenge high attacks, or to start combos. When a poke connects, as with any other move, your opponent is stuck in a stunned phase while they recover. While this window of recovery is minute, and within a fraction of a second, it is enough for you to take advantage and begin your own offense. Another use of a normal attack is to anti-air a jumping opponent. These anti-airs usually have tall, wide hit regions on them, allowing the opponent to be knocked from the air and punished accordingly for their mistake. Your down 2 on most characters will function as a vertical hitbox anti-air. Be sure to note that not every character is equipped with a decent anti-air and can sometimes turn the tide of a matchup. Finally, a normal can be used for its range compensation. These normals, called footsie normals, often hit mid, and are to be reckoned with by the opponent when entering the range in which that normal controls. The term footsie will be covered later. Only a select few characters have good footsie normals, and these normals usually constitute for the playstyles of these characters. A series of normals strained together by multiple inputs is known as a string. Strings are used for a variety of reasons. A useful string serves the purpose of either launching the opponent into the air or to open up the opponent's guard through a variety of strategies. Strings and normals can be cancelled into special moves, which is our next topic of discussion. Special moves are attacks unique to each character and determine a character's playstyle in Injustice 2. A variety of specials and their purposes are present in the game, from projectiles to command grabs. A special move can be done raw, meaning in the neutral, or done by cancelling a string into the special move in question. In fighting games designed by NetherRealm Studios, a dial-up comboing system is present, meaning the special move can be executed either on hit or on block, whether or not the move prior to the special has been completed or even animated yet. In order to cancel a string into a special move, simply input the string followed by the special move in a quick fluid succession. You don't want to move too slow, but you also don't want to be hammering the buttons as you race to finish the string of inputs. Special moves in Injustice 2 can be classified under different archetypes that basically describe the general use of these moves. Of course, these categories don't necessarily cover every special move in the game, but a very large portion of them. The most basic use of specials is the combo starter special. Most characters in the game have at least one of these, while some characters have multiple. Simply put, a combo starter is a special move that is usually cancelled into after an opponent's guard has been broken. Meter burning these moves will leave the opponent locked in a stun phase, allowing your character to freely follow up for more damage on them. Another type of special is the projectile. Again, you'll find that most characters have a projectile of some sort, and depending on how well that projectile performs can determine the playstyle of the character in question. A projectile is a special move that travels a distance across the screen in order to hit the opponent from afar. We'll go into more detail with projectiles later in the video. Next, we have command grabs, which are special moves that have more complicated inputs requiring 3 directions rather than 2, but are unblockable and do heavy damage, and can only hit the opponent in a neutral state. These, as with many subsequent specials, will also be explained in further detail later in the video. After that, we have dashing and mobility specials. These moves are often very forward advancing, quick to start up, and cover a lot of distance very quickly. Another type are the parrying/evasion special moves. These moves are done in a defensive circumstance and can vary between characters. A parry is a special move that negates any incoming damage if the hit is taken while the move is active, and can have a variety of effects from character to character. An evasion move is one that allows incoming attacks to go in through the character, offering various tactical advantages from having your opponent's move entirely whiff. Then we have stance specials, seen here on Harley Quinn, that put your character into a stance that has different follow-ups based upon which face button is pressed afterwards. As you can see, Harley's stance can be followed up with one of 3 buttons, allowing different options once the stance has been entered. Certain special moves don't offer any offensive or defensive capabilities, but rather trigger buffs that have various effects on differing characters. Other specials carry invincibility when you're getting off the ground, and function to interrupt any pressure from your opponent that may be continuing after you've been knocked down. Other specials allow you to teleport, which is pretty self-explanatory. These special moves instantaneously move your character from one spot to another on the screen. Then we have Rekkas, which are more rarely seen in fighting games, but are essentially special moves with multiple parts that require a continuous input to them, seen here on Red Hood. Finally, we have DPs, short for Dragon Punch, a type of combo starter that launches the opponent in an upward diagonal motion, allowing for a full combo to be started upon meter burning. I only threw this in here because the term gets thrown around quite a bit and can confuse some people. As you can see here, Catwoman has a DP, as does Cheetah and Superman as their wake-ups. And when we put it all together, we get the flashy stuff. Combos are a series of strings and specials designed to deal damage to the opponent and put your opponent into an optimal follow-up position upon end. Combos are communicated through combo notation, which is a sort of syntax that the community has decided upon. I'll have a few combos listed here in combo notation so you can see what each looks like. Be sure to remember that the numbers represent face buttons and the letters represent directional inputs. The squiggly dashes indicate a cancel and the commas indicate a pause between inputs. When doing airborne combos, called juggles, a factor known as character gravity increases the longer a character remains in the air. This mechanic is in place to prevent combos that last forever and is important to keep in mind when creating long, extensive combos. As you can see, by the final back 3, Green Lantern's opponent falls much faster than after a regular back 3. You may have heard the term B&B thrown around the community. Essentially what a B&B is a bread and butter combo, meaning a combo that is the most basic and well understood by the community. So a few examples here, we have Superman's B&B, Black Adam's B&B, and Starfire's B&B. These are the combos you're going to see used most by professional players. Finally, ending a combo is almost as important as the amount of damage it does. How the combo ends will determine where the opponent lies when you choose whether to continue your offense or move to the defense. Some players will opt to go all out on as much damage as possible. Some players will decide to knock their opponents down, or leave them standing, or launched full screen. It all depends on the player performing the combo. I'll be sure to demonstrate some optimized combos in the character-specific videos at a later date. And our final topic to address regarding offense is the air. Here we'll cover the mechanics of jumping and jumping attacks. Note that the bigger your character is in size, the more he or she will float in his jump, adding to the sort of big body slowness element on some characters, as opposed to the acrobatic speedy jump. Each character in the game is given 3 jumping normals, and each serves a different purpose. Jump ones typically have taller hitboxes and are used to hit another opponent out of the air. Jump 2s have longer reaching hitboxes or have ambiguous horizontal hitboxes that are used to connect with the ground opponent, allowing you to start your offense after the jump-in connects. Jump 3s are the jump-ins with large downward hitboxes that are hard to anti-air and will knock the opponent down on hit. When both characters jump at the same time and meet one another in mid-air, the situation is referred to as an air-to-air, and results in one opponent knocking the other out of the air, allowing the winner to convert off the juggled opponent. Jump 1 is typically the go-to normal for an air-to-air. When you hit a certain distance from your opponent, maybe he's outspaced your normals, or he's been staying back the whole time and you finally gotten close to him. Either way, a certain distance where a jump-in is appropriate can be taken advantage of. Say you predict he's going to do a move that can be jumped over, or you know for a fact that the character you're facing is lacking in the anti-air department. Your go-to situation will be jumping in with your jump 2. After connecting a jump-in, continue your input as though you had started your offense on the ground. Another thing to note is that not every character has exceptional jump-ins, so jumping in is not always your best option. And if you jump in on your opponent too often, he'll start to catch on. And you are the most vulnerable in the game when you are airborne. Getting anti-aired is a pretty discouraging situation when you play against an experienced player who can easily convert off of a down 2. I would never recommend that jumping in be your first option, unless your character has high mobility in the air, extremely good jump-in normals, or your opponent is lacking in ways to stop you from jumping in. Or if you're Batman and you can jump to your way to victory. Anyways, we have our jump 3s, which are typically used to punish any sort of low-quality anti-air that might be used against you. Their wide hitbox and knockdown property makes it difficult to get anything past them, and if your character has a fast enough down 1, they can be converted off of into a combo, like with Starfire here, who has arguably the best jump 3 in the game. Now jump-ins aren't the only options you have in the air. Most characters have special moves that can be done mid-air. These moves can range from projectiles to dive kicks to aerial mobility moves. These moves can be cancelled into after a jump-in connects, allowing characters like Supergirl to do things like this. If you're lucky, you pick a character who has an air dash, which is very helpful in a game like Injustice, where keeping your opponent at a distance is much more beneficial than it was in Mortal Kombat. Not only does your air dash provide mobility, it also creates a certain situation called a cross-up. In essence, a cross-up is a move done where, in order to successfully block it, a change in blocking direction must occur. Our next section will cover defense, and of course I will be covering cross-ups in that section.
I am a lover and a fighter.
In Mortal Kombat X, the game was much faster paced, and a smothering offense was favored over well-paced defensive techniques. In Injustice 2, the opposite is the case, so for anyone to last a match with a good player, a proper demonstration of blocking and showing respect to your opponent's capabilities is essential. So before we continue, it must be understood that Injustice 2 is a back-to-block fighting game. meaning that in order to block, you must walk away from your opponent or crouch. Personally, I prefer the right trigger blocking in Mortal Kombat X, where you weren't moving backwards away from your opponent as punishment for respecting possible incoming attacks, but this system does allow cross-ups to become a more prevalent form of offense than in Mortal Kombat, where holding right trigger covers you on both sides. Maybe if they designed the blocking with the use of the flip stance button in order to block cross-ups, like for instance if somebody jumped over you, you would flip your stance while holding block, and you would block from the other side. That way you're not walking backwards while blocking. But that's not important. What's important is that you know which direction to block in, and that's what we're going to cover right now. Every attack in Injustice 2, with a few exceptions, hits in one of 4 directions: overhead, high, mid, or low. Overhead moves can be blocked while walking backwards. Highs can be blocked standing, but if you were to crouch instead, a high attack will go right over your head, completely whiffing. Highs usually have a lot of range, offer advantage on block, or make good punishers. If a certain move is done by an opponent that lowers their character's hurtbox, then the move will actually go beneath the hitbox of the high, allowing your opponent to attack and duck beneath your high. This is a concept called low profiling, where a move grants the opponent a lowered hurtbox that a high cannot collide with. I'll demonstrate that right here. As you can see, Green Lantern's back 1 kind of lowers his body to the ground, allowing Starfire's forward 2 to go directly over him. This is what low profiling looks like. Green Lantern can attack while Starfire's move completely whiffs. Mid attacks can be blocked standing and crouching, but will still collide with the defender while crouched. Mids are usually stubbier than highs and offer more variety on the strings that follow the mid. Mid strings can be used to start pressure with mix-ups, frame traps, or block strings, which will be discussed later. And finally we have lows, which can only be blocked while you're crouching. If you didn't notice, there were 2 options listed previously that force you to block in 2 separate stances. This dilemma here is essentially the primary way that your guard will be opened up. This circumstance, called a mix-up, is when one or more possibilities are present in your opponent's offense, causing you to have to react accordingly. The most common form of mix-up are the overhead low mix-up and the cross-up mix-up. A great part of defense in this game is knowing how to handle mix-up situations. As you can see here, Batman has performed the back 1-1 string, which can be ended in back 1-1-2 that hits overhead. Or, Batman could do back 1-1 into slide, which hits low. This mix-up is not the most advanced for a number of reasons. Batman's slide is very risky to do, and your opponent might be afraid to throw it out in case you do happen to block low. And this mix-up can be reacted to. You'll be able to see that the last hit of back 1-1-2 has not come out, leading you to assume that he'll go for the only low option, his slide. Other mix-ups are a little more tricky, as seen with Atrocitus here. Atrocitus' forward 2-2-3 hits mid, overhead, overhead. At any point in this string, Atrocitus can choose to cancel into the Blood Puddle, which hits low for a full combo. He can do forward 2-2 Blood Puddle that hits for a mid-low instead of overhead, which is something that an experienced player can react to. The tricky part is forward 2-2-3 into Blood Puddle, which hits mid, overhead, low. This mix-up is harder to react to because the low and the overhead option on the final hit happen in close enough to the same amount of time, with a few frames difference. When this gap is so marginal, the mix-up becomes a 50-50, meaning that the timing in which you block high or low is humanly unreactable and must be a guess, hence the 50-50 chance you get it right. The average person can react to between 1/4 and 1/5 of a second, with the fastest human reaction time being recorded at 1/10 of a second, meaning if a mix-up occurs within 12 frames, the average person cannot react to it and must be guessed between the options. So, to summarize, an overhead low mix-up occurs when the defender must block either high or low. The caliber of this mix-up depends entirely on the number of options presented in the opponent's offense and how quickly these mix-ups happen. This may sound a little crazy and unfair to make an unreactable guessing game, but there are other outside factors that prevent mix-ups from being true 50-50s. One factor would be the animation of your opponent, as seen here on Green Lantern. Green Lantern has the option to choose his overhead, forward 2, down 1, or completely end his forward 2 string and start up his low, back 1. You can tell by the animation that the overhead is not coming, forcing you to block low. Another factor is a technique called a fuzzy guard. Essentially, a fuzzy guard is a predetermined timing rather than a reaction of when to block high or low. Here on Atrocitus, the aforementioned 50-50 on his forward 2-2-3 and forward 2-2-3 Blood Puddle can be fuzzy guarded. The low option, his forward 2-2-3 into Blood Puddle, comes out quicker than his forward 2-2-3. If an experienced player knows this, he can block low, then quickly transition into standing blocking to to cover both options. This type of blocking, when practiced to an extreme, can negate even the smallest frame differences when it comes to mix-ups. Rarely do we see a true 50-50 that hits within the same timing and forces the opponent to guess. But since you're just dying to see a true 50-50, I'll demonstrate one real quick. Here on Batman, after we do his grapple restand, we can follow up with a neutral jump 2. This will give us enough hit advantage to follow up with a second jump 2. Since Batman's jump 2 is an ambiguous cross-up, it is impossible to determine which side the move will hit on. Right here you can see that Batman's jump 2 can hit either in front or behind the opponent. This is truly unreactable to the point where even the Batman player has no idea which side will hit. This type of cross-up leads us into our next topic, aerial defense. As mentioned previously, Injustice 2 is a back-to-block game, meaning you have to switch the sides you block on when the opponent hits on either side of you. A cross-up is a move that takes advantage of this mechanic by forcing you to block in the opposite direction by hitting you from the opposite side. These are executed by jumping over the opponent and hitting them from the opposite side. Characters with an air dash can be very tricky about which side they land on and can actively choose whether to cross up or not. Other characters have ambiguous cross-ups on their jump 2s. An ambiguous cross-up is a move with a wide hitbox that, when done close enough to you mid-air, can be a complete toss-up about which side it hits on. In situations like this, my suggestion would be to anti-air if possible, or just eat the mix-up and predict the jump in the future. Most anti-airs cannot deal with cross-ups out of an air dash, however. For that situation, you'll need a character with an anti-cross-up move, which hits high enough vertically above your character to anti-air them from the opposite side of you. Even fewer characters in the game have this kind of move and can definitely turn the tide of a matchup if used properly. For some characters, aerial offense is a main part of their game plan. Similar to how you're supposed to outspace your opponent's normals on the ground, you must also do this for any jump-in normals as well. When a jumping normal is completely whiffed, there is a period of time when the character lands that they are recovering from the entire move, allowing a good defender to strike and fully punish them for their mistake. This concept of punishing outspaced jump-ins is called a trip guard, and when used effectively, can seriously scare your opponent from jumping in on you. All defense comes down to an Injustice is respect. Sure, it's helpful to know where to block when you're under pressure, but a lot of what defense is comes down to understanding your opponent's capabilities and respecting them. There are moves in the game that are thrown out specifically for this reason. These moves are called checks, and they are simply to demonstrate your own capabilities to your opponent, forcing you to respect them. Aquaman has a check from full screen, his Tentacle Strike. This move is not necessarily thrown out because you're going for damage, or even looking to hit them for that matter. The move is used to say to your opponent, be careful how you approach me because at any point I can throw out this tentacle and hit you for some real damage. Against Aquaman from full screen, you are forced to respect this move, and will have to walk carefully towards him, waiting to crouch when the Tentacle Strike is used, and move in while he recovers. As a defender, you will also have to respect frame advantage that certain moves possess. Frame advantage is a complicated topic that will be covered later in the video, but for now I'll sum it up by saying that certain moves, when blocked, allow the attacker to move before the defender once the string ends. For instance, Cyborg's 1-1 string is advantageous on block, so you must respect this advantage he has and not try to follow up with your own offense after blocking. You may see Cyborg check with a down 1 afterwards. This will demonstrate he is capable of moving before you are, forcing you to respect his advantage or get hit by his follow-up. Respecting an opponent's range is just as important too. Knowing that Scarecrow's forward 2 can hit you from this far away will force you to respect his forward 2 and think twice about recklessly approaching him or doing anything in that distance. And of course there are two sides to this coin of respect. The opposite of respecting a move would be to challenge. In layman's terms, call somebody's bluff. For instance, one of Superman's most popular pressure strings is forward 2-3 into his straight, into whatever offense comes next. When Superman cancels into his straight, whatever recovery that was on his forward 2-3 is now gone, and he can move before you. If Superman does a move that is quick, it will usually hit you right after you've come out of recovery, forcing you to respect his advantage or take the hit. There are times when the Superman believes that you will respect this advantage and will try something that takes longer. When he does a longer move after the trait, you can challenge his advantage by doing a down 1, which essentially calls the bluff that Superman was going to use this advantage that he had after his forward 2-3 into his trait. By successfully challenging this advantage, you've interrupted Superman's pressure and now have a chance to start your own offense. Now that you've learned the basics of offense and defense, we're going to move on to another state of the game, when your character has been knocked down.
You brought this on yourself.
The knockdown state is an important moment in the match for both the attacker and the defender. Whenever the opponent takes the final hit of a combo, they will fall onto the ground and be stuck in knockdown for a very short amount of time. While you're knocked down, you're entirely invincible and have a variety of options when getting up. The only exception to this invincibility is when a specific special move has an OTG property that can hit you through the knockdown invincibility. OTG stands for off the ground, and Gorilla Grodd has an OTG move seen here. As you can see, the ground pound that Gorilla Grodd does hits Dr. Fate right through his invincibility on knockdown. The transition from knockdown to standing is called the wake up. As the person being knocked down, you essentially only have 3 options. You can choose to wake up normally, whether you block or not upon standing, which works if your opponent is trying to bait you into doing something unsafe upon wake up. You can choose to delay your wake up. This is a very important tool that several casual players fail to use when it can very well turn the tide of a matchup. A common tactic that your opponent might look for is to set up traps for you when you're knocked down, and by delaying your wake up, it will negate some of these traps and throw off your opponent's timing, giving you a chance to fight back when you stand up. Delay your wake up simply by holding down either for a short or a long duration when you're in knockdown. On the opposite side of this, you can opt for a quick get up by pressing one of the face buttons as you hit the ground after being knocked down. This quick get up is only an option after certain strings knock you down because other moves carry harder knockdown properties, which we'll go over later. And your third option, arguably the most important option, is the wake up attack. Note that not everyone has a good wake up attack, and some wake up attacks are better than others. A good wake up attack is one where the startup frames allow your character to be completely invincible, making your opponent's hits go right through you, causing you to be safe. Not every wake up is safe to use, however, so be very careful in throwing some of these out. I'll be sure to cover how you can tell a move is safe to use or not later. But here we have Dr. Fate, who has been knocked down by Gorilla Grodd. And when Gorilla Grodd goes to apply pressure on knockdown, Fate does his wake up onk, causing Grodd's moves to go completely through him and for him to be sent full screen, taking the full damage of the onk. Many characters in the game have attacks like this, while others struggle in the wake up game. Note that you cannot wake up attack after delaying your wake up. Now, of course, the attacker has several options when the opponent has been knocked down as well. A very viable option for the attacker is to continue his or her pressure even after his opponent has been knocked down. This sort of strategy is called an okazeme, oki for short, which is a combination of 2 Japanese words meaning waking and attacking. As a Green Lantern player, I like to end my combos in the 2-2-3 string and dash forward to apply oki pressure on my knocked down opponent. I have a variety of options from here, especially in the corner. I dash forward, and from here I can neutral jump into either my jump 2 or jump 3, which will cross up or not cross up depending on which normal I perform and at what time. Most oki pressure can be escaped, however, by the defender simply performing an invincible wake-up attack, as previously mentioned. Another type of oki pressure is called a media attack. A media attack is when you use a move that has an active hitbox for a very long time in order to hit your opponent on the exact frame they wake up with. Media attacks in Injustice 2 are more rare to find than in games like Street Fighter, where not every character has an invincible wake-up, but in Injustice 2, 90% of the roster has some form of invincible wake-up. The best media attacks in the game come from jump-ins with double-digit active frames, meaning the hitbox for the attack is active for over 10 frames, which is an enormous amount of time compared to other moves in the game. Another very important tactic in this game is known as set play, where you intentionally lay out traps for the opponent when they're knocked down. Therefore, a very strong option for some characters is to perform setups upon knockdown. As seen here, the Joker knocks down the opponent and places his teeth that hit low on their body, then follows up with a jumping attack which hits overhead, creating a pretty dirty, hard to block setup which will lead to a full combo whether the overhead or the low hits the opponent. In order to block this as a defender, you can either delay your wake up to the max, and the setup will be entirely useless, or you can test your luck and try and block the overhead and the low as they come at you at the same time. And finally, as the attacker, you can choose to bait your opponent's wake up and punish an unsafe one accordingly. As Green Lantern, I dash up after my 2-2-3 string knocks down, then I follow up by crouch blocking. Atrocitus here thought I was going to apply oki pressure, so he woke up with his invincible wake up, his punch float. Since I knew this move hits high, I ducked, causing the move to whiff over me. All I do is wait for his punches to cease, and I follow up with a down 2, successfully punishing him and receiving a generous amount of damage on my punish. Now there are certain moves in the game which have special properties when knocking the opponent down. There are, in fact, levels of knockdown in the game, as I mentioned previously. There's the soft knockdown, which is just the normal knockdown and can be delayed or tech rolled or woken up from after. Then there's a hard knockdown, which cannot be tech rolled from, but can still be delayed or woken up from. Each of these levels of knockdown have different timings in which you have to input your wake up attack. Since you have to input your wake up attack just before your character stands up, the timings will differ depending on the level of knockdown you're in. Therefore, it is important to note your opponent's knockdown capabilities and familiarize yourself with wake up attacks before you catch yourself in a hard knockdown situation and eat somebody's well-timed setup.
I will grind you into dust.